Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday morning at the Sanctuary. I'm Mike Robertson, pastor here at the Sanctuary. What a beautiful day it is today. It's a good day for you to venture out, even if it's just into your backyard. It's very nice out today. Beautiful day in Austin, Texas. And I'm happy to see you here. I'm happy that you've decided to spend some of your precious time with us for a few moments this morning. Announcement-wise, don't forget our Wednesday night chats. They're always a lot of fun. I'm mystified why some of you have never participated in the Wednesday night Zoom thing. It's a lot of fun. There's no pressure at all. It's usually we play games or we ask a question that doesn't require a lot of intellectual digging, but it's just, have you ever done this? Or what's your favorite this? Or if you could do one thing or go one place, where would it be? It's just a time of sharing and fellowship and communion. And it's a replacement of sorts for what we get to have when we're here on Sunday mornings before and after the church service. But we actually get to go into even more detail. I think the group that visits on Wednesday night would agree. We've learned so much more about each other than we ever would have learned just in a couple of minutes on Sunday morning. So if you haven't ever done that, please consider doing it this Wednesday night. But I do have one new thing to announce to you that I'm very excited about. Very excited about. We're going to do a special project in December to as an outreach or just as a gift really to our community, to the families who live in Terrytown and the surrounding neighborhoods. We're going to do what I'm calling the drive-by Santa experience. Now, Santa may look a little familiar to you there. Yeah, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. I've always wanted to have the chance to grow the real beard and be a real Santa. But we're going to do that in December. These are the dates: a Sunday and a Monday night, December 20th and 21st, for 2 hours each night, right out in the parking lot. We're going to have it set up to where it's a Santa's workshop scene, and cars will drive in the long driveway right beside the church. And then as they make the big turn to go to the exit of the parking lot, that's where they'll be able to see the scene we're setting up. Kids will be able to get out of their car and they'll be separated by a workbench and some wrapped presents and stuff, but they'll be able to stand right in front of Santa and their parents will be able to take a picture. And so it's the closest thing we can do at this particular year as far as having a visit with Santa Claus. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. You know, we've done a Meet Santa experience the last 2 years inside the church, but I think this is going to be even better. We're doing some special things, and we've got about a month to go, but we're going to need help. We're going to need people to direct traffic. We're going to need people to collect letters from kids to Santa Claus, pass out goodie bags. We're going to need a lot of help in the setup and take down each night of the set that we're putting together for this experience. But I want to put it out there in advance so that you can begin telling your family and your friends and neighbors December 20th and 21st. They need to be sure and come one of those nights to the drive-by Santa experience. I think it's going to be a great time, and I want everybody to come and participate. Well, one way, from one side or the other. Okay? Put it on your calendar, December 20th and 21st. All right, let's get down to the message. The message, as was titled in the email you got and on YouTube, is what's your gift? What's your gift? And we're going to get to that, but that's a big question. And there are a lot of big questions that we ask in life, and that's good. It's good to ask questions. Some people think, well, God doesn't like it if we ask questions. No, God makes us curious, creative creatures so that we want to know more. We want to seek and find answers. Not everything is clear to us. We can't understand everything God understands, but we can grow in our own understanding. So we have big questions that we need to answer in life. And one of them is, what are we supposed to do here? What do I do on this earth while I'm waiting for the next step, the afterlife? You can be so interested in heaven that you're no earthly good to anybody. And what are we supposed to do while we're here? Well, there are some clues not just clues, there are some answers in the Bible. And I want to look at a couple of those verses this morning with you. The first one is from the Old Testament, book of Exodus, chapter 19. This is right at the time that God is giving Moses the 10 Commandments. And he's telling him all these things that Moses is recording and then sharing with the Israelites as they're making their journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. But God says this: "You have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. If you will listen obediently to what I say and keep my covenant, out of all peoples, you'll be my special treasure. The whole earth is mine to choose from, but you are special, a kingdom of priests, a holy nation." I want you to notice that phrase right there, a kingdom of priests. God says, you are my chosen people. You're a whole kingdom of priests. What does that mean? What does that mean to us? I don't feel like a priest. You may not feel like a priest, but before you say, well, yeah, that's Old Testament. The same thought is conveyed in the New Testament in one of Peter's letters. In fact, his first one that we have, 1 Peter chapter 9, Peter says this: "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." So you can't say, well, that's Old Testament thought, it doesn't apply to me anymore. Here it is in the New Testament. What are the implications, though, of being a community, a nation of priests? What does it mean? Well, you know, our faith begins with your personal relationship with God. Well, you can't, in the old times, and still to this day in some religions, you can't have a personal relationship with God if you're not allowed to speak directly to God. If you have to have a mediator to go between you and God. Those Israelites traveling through the desert could not approach God directly. They had to go through a priest who would then approach God and share their concerns. When Jesus came, he did away with all that. He said, now you're all priests. You don't have to have a go-between anymore. You can go directly to God without passing go or paying $200. You can go directly to God and share your needs, your concerns, your praises, your joys, your concerns. You don't have to go through a mediator to do that. You are a priest. Well, when you are a priest, yeah, your faith starts with your personal relationship to God, but it doesn't end there. Because priests do more than just love God. They care for other people as well. Priests have a ministry. They have things that they do to help people. And so this is what we're being told really by Peter and by God in the Old Testament. If you're a nation of priests, that means you're supposed to be ministering. You're supposed to be doing things for other people. That's how we show God's love in us. Well, being a priest doesn't mean that everybody's called to be a pastor or a missionary and go to a foreign country and preach sermons and lead Bible studies. Not at all. Everybody's called, though, to be the minister of something. The minister of something. Everybody has a vocation, and by vocation, I don't mean a job. I mean a calling. You may do your calling through your job, or they may be related. It may be a totally separate thing. But God has work for each one of us. He has something for us to do in this world, some calling for each one of us to do. And if you don't know what it is, if you need a hint, it's very likely to have something to do with the way in which you will show your love to your neighbor. So part of our work as Christians is to discern what God is calling us to do, what God is calling us to be. And the problem, I think, is that oftentimes we think too churchy. Now, you may not be accustomed to having the preacher at the church say, don't be so churchy about stuff. But that's what I'm here to tell you. God has a ministry for you, and it may not be churchy at all. One of my favorite stories has to do with a young woman named Debbie. Debbie was a young lady who got married right after high school, married her high school sweetheart, never went to college, never had a good job. She immediately became a mom, had a couple of kids. Her husband was in the financial planning business, and he was trying to get started in that business and climb up the ladder to assure their future together. And one day her husband came home and said, Debbie, the boss has invited us over to his house for dinner. Ooh. So she put on her best dress. He wore his suit. They went to the boss's house, and it was big. It was a mansion. It was plush. And they had dinner. They were served dinner. Not grab a plate and go to the kitchen. No, they were served dinner. And after dinner, they repaired to the library. I don't ever say that at my house. Let's repair to the library. But they went to the library, and they're sitting there after this great meal. And the husband's big boss says, so Debbie, tell me about you. What are your plans? What do you want to accomplish? And Debbie kind of shrugged and said, well, I'm just trying to get orientated. And the boss turns and he walks over to one of the bookcases and he pulls out a big, thick dictionary, and he walks over to her and drops it in her lap and says, there's no such word as orientated. It's oriented. And if you can't speak the English language, you're going to have a hard time getting anywhere. Well, she was horrified, terribly embarrassed, but also terribly angry. She cried all the way home in the car, but at the same time she said, nobody is ever going to make me feel that way again. Nobody is ever going to make me feel as useless and stupid as my husband's boss did tonight. And so she thought, I've got to do something in my life, but what can I do? What are my gifts? I've never been to college. I don't have any particularly great talents. And she racked her brain thinking, what am I good at? What can I do? And she could only come up with one thing that she was better than average at, and that was she knew how to make a really good chocolate chip cookie. Debbie had been interested in baking since she was 9 years old, and she had taken the time to compare. And she knew that this brown sugar was better than that brown sugar, and she knew that butter was better than oleo, and she knew that this was the way to bake them right, and this way they would come out too dry or too crisp. She had experimented, and she made a great chocolate chip cookie. And so she had the thought in her mind, I wonder if somebody would pay me to do that. Pay me to make cookies. Maybe I could open a cookie store. Well, this was in the mid-'70s. There was no such thing as a cookie store. Oh, there were bakeries that baked cakes and pies and quiches and torts. And, oh, yeah, we got a few cookies, too. There was no such thing as a cookie store. And so Debbie went to the bank to ask for a loan. No, they wouldn't even consider it. She went to another bank, another bank, another bank, another bank. Over a dozen banks she went to. Nobody believed in her idea, her vision. Finally, one said, okay, we'll give you a loan. We'll give you a small loan, but it'll be at 21% interest. He gave her a very high interest rate, but it was literally the only straw she had to grasp at. So she said, okay, she rented a little space downtown, and she set about getting ready to open her own little shop. And her husband kept trying to caution her, saying, Debbie, I don't want you to be realistic. I don't want you to get your hopes up. It'll be amazing if you make $50 out of this. Well, the first day, Debbie goes to her little shop early in the morning. Well, it's still dark outside. And she begins mixing the dough, and she begins cutting out the cookies and putting them in the oven and baking them and pulling them out and putting them on beautiful racks and plates. And then at 9 o'clock, she goes to the door of the store and unlocks it and turns the little sign from closed to open. And she sits there and waits. And nobody came in at all. She had put everything she had in this one basket, and nobody came in at all. And she thought, I have to do something more. I have to do something different. What can I do? And so Debbie filled up a tray with these fresh cookies, and she went out the door of her shop, locked it behind her, and she went to the building next door, and the one after that, and the office building across the street, and the one around the corner. And at every place she would say, would you like a fresh chocolate chip cookie? And people would take a cookie and take a bite of it and say, man, that's one of the best cookies I've ever had. Where can I get more? And so Debbie feels, she is Mrs. Fields, that eventually would be the CEO of a $1 billion food conglomerate. Started out with a little shop where nobody would come in to buy a cookie. What's the lesson that we learn there? You can't just sit on your mountain somewhere saying, okay, I'll minister to somebody if they come in to where I am. No, she had to go out and find them. But look at what she brought to the table. None of us, I don't think, would say, what's your talent? What's your skill? Well, I can bake a good cookie. That's not a skill. Tell Debbie feels that now. That's not a skill. That's not an ability. It's become a $1 billion business because of her faith and belief in it. She kept at it until she made something new happen. Part of your work as a Christian is deciding or learning what God is calling you to be, calling you to do, even if it may seem a very unlikely gift at the time. Look what Dr. King said. He said, if it falls to your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived the great street sweeper who swept his job well. That's a beautiful thought. And it's really straight out of the Bible. If we come to realize that all Christians are ministers, we still may fall into the trap of thinking that all ministry is church work. But Dr. King says sweeping the street can be ministry. Baking cookies can be ministry. We narrowly define what ministry seems like to us. And we usually fail to see that the ministry of God's people includes what they do within the church, but also way outside the church. Dr. King's thought is put another way by Peter again in the book of 1 Peter. And he said, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. And then he says this. Each of us should use whatever gifts you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. The next verse he says, if anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised. He could have gone on to say, if anybody sweeps streets, they should do it as though that is their artwork. See, whatever you do can be ministry. It's all in why you do it. What's your motivation for doing it? You can minister to people without ever going to seminary without ever memorizing a bunch of verses of Scripture or learning to be an eloquent speaker, you can minister by some very simple things. Look, I've been to the Holy Land twice. I've been to Israel. I've walked the actual streets where Jesus walked. But you know what? I think the most meaningful place I've ever stood is, it's right here at this place. This place called Salvation Mountain. It's in the middle of nowhere in the deserts of Southern California that are flat and gray and no vegetation. And this whole mountain is the vision of one old man named Leonard Knight. And when I met Leonard there, he was 78 years old. He was still working from before sunlight every morning. Leonard had one skill. He couldn't bake a cookie. He knew how to make adobe out of mud and straw. And he would mix a wheelbarrow full of adobe, and then he would find a spot on this mountain that he made. He would find a spot to slap it on there and mold it and shape it, and then paint it with paint that people brought to him, leftover cans of paint. And the whole reason this mountain exists is to tell people that God is love. Now, again, you might say, making mud is not a talent. It is not a skill. Folks, 100 people a day, sometimes 200 people a day, would visit Salvation Mountain. And Leonard would say, the message is, God loves you. It's a simple message. Don't make it too complicated. It's just, God is love. I don't get to say that to 100 people a day. I don't get now, of course, especially now, I don't see 10 people a day. But the lesson I learned from Leonard Knight is, it may seem like a trivial thing, but if you use it, if you use your gift as ministry, you can touch many, many, many lives. Years ago, I moved to Burnet, Texas, to work at a church there. And I was traveling one day from Burnet to Marble Falls, which is about 14 miles. And I got on Highway 281 and I was driving towards Marble Falls, and I saw a little old lady at the side of the road. And she was wearing a nice dress, and a hat, carrying a purse, and she had her thumb out, hitchhiking. And she was edging way out into the highway because I guess nobody was stopping. And I didn't stop either. I thought, who is this crazy person? And then one day I asked somebody, after I'd seen her another time or two, who is that woman who's hitchhiking? And they said, oh, that's Funeral Fanny. Funeral Fanny? What? They said she was a woman who had lost a child. She had a child that died. And when she had the funeral for the child, nobody came. And she made a decision in her mind that whenever someone died, she was going to make sure there was always somebody there for their funeral. And so whether it was in Burnet, at one of any of the churches or funeral homes there, or Marble Falls, 14 miles away, Fanny would hitchhike to get to a funeral service, sometimes going to 2 or 3 a day. Nobody asked her to do this. Nobody compensated her for this. She just did it because it was one thing that she could do. And so that became her ministry. Now, Leonard Knight and Funeral Fanny were doing ministry even though no church in the world probably would ever have hired either one of them. Well, we don't know their theology. Their theology is love. Their theology is concern for other people, caring for others. In comparison, my own obsessions seem very trivial. My own qualifications seem very trivial in a way. Whether it's baking cookies or writing letters or driving a senior citizen to the grocery store, there's many ways that a simple gift can become ministry. I have a very good friend who used to volunteer at the church I worked at before. It was a large church. She would volunteer to answer the phones one morning every week. Now, she may think that was her ministry, and it may be, but every time she came to answer the phone, she would make goodies. She would try something new. It was never the same thing twice. She would make goodies and bring goodies for the staff of the church. She might think that's her ministry, and it might be, but what her real ministry was, on the morning she was there to answer the phone, there was a steady stream of church employees, administrative assistants, custodial staff, even many of the pastors on the church. There was a steady stream of people who just wanted to come in and sit beside her and chat for a few minutes because she was the most encouraging, best listener I've ever known. And I was part of that stream. Whenever she came, I would sit beside her for 5 or 10 minutes and she would say, "What's happening? How's your daughter doing? What are you and Lisa doing? What's next?" And I would talk to her, and she was genuinely attentive and genuinely concerned. And I thought, this is the nicest person I've ever met. She would say, "That's not much of a ministry." I would say, "It ministered to me. It was everything to me." So I said the title of the sermon was, "What's Your Gift?" But really, you've got a gift. I hope you've discovered what it is. And if you've discovered what your gift is, this is the real question. What is your ministry? How are you going to use your gift to help other people, to show your love to other people? What are you going to do for your ministry? I'll see you soon. God bless you all.